Hello, YouTube. It's Jen. Welcome to episode alpha of a series that has gone far, far off of the rails that I originally had in mind when I first started it. This is not going to be a canon episode of the Speedwalk. Last time I mentioned that we were going to be fighting Kameha, which we can do now that we have 50 different monsters recruited. We are not going to be doing that. We're going to be exploring the mechanics of the game and discussing some of the things that I've learned that change basically everything about how I thought I was going to be going about doing this challenge efficiently, and even what form the final product is going to take. In order to do that, okay, there's like 10 different things that I need to explain at once, and I'm going to do my best to present them in a logical order. Oh, I already did this. Okay, yes. So, basically, we need to talk about the NPCs that you can encounter in Magic Key Worlds. This is something that I did not explore adequately until relatively recently, when I returned to the Cobi Max Catalog project and started trying to clean up some loose ends. That ended up being not just loose ends, but in fact, gigantic threads with twists, turns, implications, and so on. But basically, I'm going to try and manipulate encounters with a specific kind of NPC, and those NPCs are warriors. Warriors have a chance of giving you a warp wing or a magic key. It's important that we be able to manipulate for warriors because, presumably, the speedrun is going to want lots of magic keys, and fighting warriors is a relatively efficient way of getting magic keys. The only other efficient method is via the arena. By winning Open Class B over and over again, and I think you have a 15% chance on every victory of getting a key, and an 85% chance of getting 6,000 gold, which is a full refund and then some. So it's sustainable. It's just slow, but at least you can do it by just holding down the A button and and pressing down on your D-pad once every now and then. But basically, the different NPCs that can appear in the Magic Key Worlds have different sort of conditions under which that they can spawn, and it's possible for you to meet some of the conditions for some of the NPCs, but not others. Warriors have a very simple set of conditions. You need to have at least 1,000 gold, and you need to have at least one empty space in your inventory. That's very significant. But in order to avoid getting any other kind of NPC, we also need to do a little bit of adjusting of things. So we need to have at least 1,000 gold. We also shouldn't have more than 5,000 gold. In addition, if you sum the digits of our gold, which are 3887, the resulting number is larger than the number 12. That is good, because it allows us to dodge a particular NPC who appears if that number is 12 or less. Also, we need to check the HP values. We need to make sure that the last digit of the HP values of our three monsters is not the same. 1, 1, and 4. Okay, good. So we're dodging another NPC that we don't want. Next, experience values. If the last three digits of the experience that a monster has accumulated over time is the same, that spawns bards, and we are going to want to spawn bards, but not right now. So 224, we're good. 789, we're good. 708, we're good. And then last, we need to make sure that the HP values of our monsters are not repeating digits. And that can be a single-digit number. A single-digit number is competing a repeated number, but basically only one digit. And so 641, that's not a repeating digit. 666 would be, 66 would be, 7 would be. 0 also is a repeating digit. It's considered a repeating digit of 000. So if you have a fainted monster, that caused a particular kind of NPC to appear. So we don't want that. Right? But there you go. No repeating HP, no repeating HP, no repeating HP. So we've done our prep work. Basically, whenever I want to do this, I'm going to need to deposit gold until I have the right value between 1,000 and 5,000 that has a high digit sum. This game is so bizarre, dude, but that's just how it works. That's just how it works. I don't make the rules, I just speedrun the game, figuring things out as I go. So, With things configured this way, we should only encounter warriors. There are a couple of other things that we need to keep in mind, though, in terms of how NPCs work. And this is stuff that I've tested relatively recently. I'm gonna get up to 23. 23 is or 24 is the inventory limit. So I want to be near, but not at that limit. Because as I mentioned, if my inventory is full, NPCs will not spawn. Cool. NPCs will not spawn on map squares that have items on them. So if I'm trying to summon NPCs, I should just pick up and throw away items. Or pick up and keep them just as long as I don't have a full pack, right? But basically, anytime you move onto a map square that doesn't have an item on the ground, there you go. Found one pretty much right away. You have a chance of spawning a warrior. This is the red warrior. There are also yellow warriors. My understanding is that they are exactly the same except for their sprite and their dialogue. Their dialogue is very slightly different. But they have the same function. You fight them and either get a warp wing or a magic key at the end. Time to explain thing number 3. It depends on how you're counting it, I suppose. And I suppose I should also start by explaining by way of background. So, I was watching the older episodes in order to reacquaint myself with the project and remind myself of the constraints that I'm working under in order to try and get all 310 of the monsters in a relatively efficient manner. And in the course of rewatching these episodes, I had a recurring thought, which is I hate Big Roost. I hate Big Roost so much. I hate that this monster can't be bred. I hate that this monster's not available in Cobi's story worlds specifically. And I hate that I'm going to have to potentially roll for magic keys over and over again until I find one. That's really annoying. There has to be a better way. And then I realized, wait a second, what if there's a better way? You can steal monsters in this game. You can steal monsters from any NPC that you can fight, not just warriors, bards that you can fight, the evil monks, the friars or whatever, who will heal you after you fight them. You can steal their monsters too. There are shopkeepers that you can fight who give you meat. You can steal their monsters as well. But anyway, I had the very simple thought. The thought that has now caused me to descend into madness and despair, and then eventually escape it. But what if Big Roost was on the table of monsters that you could steal from? Well, that would fix everything, assuming that you could target it with some level of consistency. But until a few days ago, I had no idea how the encounter tables for foreign monster masters worked at all. So I was starting from basically zero knowledge. But the information was out there. I asked around on the Dragon Warrior Monsters, well, it's just the Dragon Quest series in general. Speedrunning server has a channel for Dragon Quest monsters. So I asked around there, got connected to some information from a Japanese gaming website, translated that information into English where I needed to in order to be able to figure out what's going on, and learned that it's complicated. Like everything else in this game. But specifically, it's complicated in a very specific way. So, we need to talk about alpha and beta values. That's what the website calls them, and I've decided that that's a useful nomenclature, so that's what I'm going to call them also. So, there's a formula for determining which table of monsters is looked at. Each table contains 10 different monsters on it. There are some repeats across the different tables. There are no repeats within the different tables. So, based on your monster's stats, you're going to be encountering only one of these tables of 10 monsters at a time. These tables are sorted by the alpha value, which is a metric for determining your monster's impressiveness, I guess. Basically, whether your monsters have high stats for their level. Given their level, they have very high stats. And the reason that I say that is because your impressiveness score, or whatever, the beta value of each individual monster, which is then averaged out into the alpha value that determines the table, is determined by adding points for your attack, defense, agility, intelligence, maximum HP, and maximum MP stats, and then subtracts an amount for every level that you have. That's going to be very important later. So, in order to gain access to tables with more powerful monsters, and usually rarer monsters, you need to increase the stats of your monsters while keeping to a minimum as you can, increasing their level. Basically, the way it works is you get 2 points for every point of attack, defense, maximum HP, and maximum MP. And then you get 1.5 points for every point of agility and intelligence. Right? Stay with me. You sum all of that, you subtract 24 points for every level, and then you divide the result by 250, round down. And that gives a monster's beta value, their impressiveness score. So, just as an example, well actually, I made a calculator in Google Sheets that allows me to rapidly enter the statistics of a monster and determine what its beta value is, and I've done it for the 3 monsters that I've developed over the course of this series, King Crimson, Dio, and Killer Queen. So, just as it happens with these stats, you know, level 52, an attack of 558 or whatever, King Crimson has a beta value of 14, which is on the higher end. Once you get past 19, it sort of stops mattering, because the highest level encounter table is 19, and if your team average, if the alpha value is higher than 19, you just get the 19 table. So it's really the 19 and above table. But 14 is up there. 14 is pretty good. Dio has a beta value of 17, right? And Killer Queen over here has a beta value of 12. And in all instances of division, with the math that's done behind the scenes of this game, you are supposed to truncate, or in other words, round down. So, after doing all of the math, we've got 14, 17, and 12. The average of those round down is 14. So, right now, with these 3 monsters in my party, I have an alpha value of 14. And because of that, I'm going to be accessing the alpha value 14 table of monsters, which has these 10 monsters on it. Mad Dragon, Trumpeter, Wing Snake, Snapper, Army Crab, Orochi, Wyvern, Stagbug, Devapine, and Archdemon. I think that's all 10. So, as I start my encounter with this guy, those are the only 10 monsters that I should see, and I also know approximately what level they're at in the event that I recruit them. But let's just confirm. Now that I've done my little divination, well, there you go. Army Crab, Devapine, and Wyvern. Exactly as predicted. So, I'm going to try and recruit one of these monsters. But basically, now I have an appreciation for what kind of monsters the foreign monster masters can give me. And I can also develop an appreciation for what I'm going to have to do in order to try and access specific monsters. This is a little bit more complicated, though, because... whoa, okay. There's Defeat. Nice. Defeat is going to be very useful. Oh, no recruit? And no magic key? Wow, rip off. Alright, we're going to keep walking around. Basically, the table of monsters that are obtainable from foreign monster masters is kind of strange. You would think that the monsters, like, strictly get rarer and stronger as you increase up the alpha value table, but not so, and... the one that stands out to me as the most fucked up and notable is Alpha Level 9, which is very middling. It's almost at the exact middle of the tables in terms of value. But it has some pretty nuts stuff on it. You can get Metal Kings, you can get Orochi, you can get Rose Vines, which allows you to skip using bosses as an ingredient if you can make it happen. Serpentia also would save some time. Shantak is also on that list. That's a very rare bird. Saves a lot of time. Just above that at 10, you can get Dark Horns. Was that a bard? That was a bard. I just despawned a bard, but okay. Well, I was explaining earlier, if you have a monster that has its experience gained is a 3 repeating number, then... how many items are in my inventory? Almost full. Okay. That's fine. You know what? Actually, I'm going to force a bard encounter intentionally just so that I can show you what those do, because that will also serve the purposes of my explanation. So, excuse me while I go back to the town and purchase some more repellents. Assuming that I don't bring my gold value below the desirable amount, which I think it's still fine. That's still above 10. Or that's still above 12. Yes. Okay, good. So, cool. And I'm not going to save, because I don't want to save this progress. This is a non-canon episode. Where was I? The tables are very strange, and are potentially very lucrative and useful for the speedrun. There's some bonkers stuff. Also, at the very high levels, there's some very useful stuff also. At the alpha level 19 table that I was talking about earlier as the maximum, you can get gold slimes. And white kings, and gold golems, and robust too. But gold slime in particular is, like, incredibly time-intensive to breed, assuming that you're not recruiting it or its ingredients from the wild in a Magic Key world, which you would have to be very lucky in order to get. So, theft has a lot of potential as a way to speed up the run. And by doing a little bit of math and preparation, I can at least know in advance what 10 monsters I'm going to be getting 3 of when I encounter a foreign monster master. There can be duplicates, unfortunately. Like, you could have a fight with 2 mad dragons and a trumpeter in it. That's fine. Oh, that was a bard. I see, this is... it's always so hard, because you're just kind of, like, walking around, and then you don't notice until it's too late that you actually spawned the thing that you intended to spawn. But I'm going to try and pay attention while also continuing the explanation. Surely nothing will go wrong there, in terms of me being able to keep my focus on 3 different things at the same time. Anyway, yeah. This is just... Right, that's what I was explaining. There can be duplicates, but the good news is, because you're encountering 3 monsters at a time, you have a 70% chance of not getting the monster that you want within 1 try. And then you have a 49% chance of not getting the monster that you want within 2 tries. But that does mean that you have a 51% chance, assuming that you only wanted 1 monster off of the list of 10. And as far as I understand, the distribution is completely even within those 10. You have a 51% chance of getting it within the first 2 people that you fight. And then the odds continue to degrade or whatever as you continue. And there's like all sort of stuff that you can do with expected values and predicted time investment and stuff like that. You could make all kinds of projections if you were inclined. I'm not that inclined. This is already complicated enough. But perhaps you can see why this presents some difficulty to me as a speedrunner, someone who is trying to gather all of these monsters quickly. I have an unstable encounter table, an unstable extra region that I can access with some time and effort, but the results are going to be very random, including whether or not I'm able to actually recruit monsters after I encounter them. Finally got that bard. Okay, but, I need to consider stolen monsters for a lot of things. I'll just go back to the original question, which was, can you steal a Big Roost? And the answer is no. Big Roost is not on any of the encounter tables for foreign monster masters. So that in particular is a bust. We are still going to have to find a Big Roost from a Magic Key world. As in, getting a Magic Key world that has 1-star birds in it, and then also specifically has Big Roost in it. Because, as Exploring Black Torch has instructed us, just having a world with qualifying birds is not enough. You also still need to get the actual bird. I still need to fully comb through Black Torch just to make 100% certain that, like, none of the dungeons on any of their floors happen to have this fucking chicken. And that is probably something that I will do at some point, but it's not something that I'm going to do right now because I have more important things to work on, like trying to figure out how my run got so fucked up, and what I'm going to do about it. I want to use these incredibly impressive and useful ingredients efficiently. But, in order to get access to the tables that I want, I need to be able to control my monster's stats. In order to reach the highest value tables, the tables that require your monster's stats to be sufficiently high, I'm going to need to inflate the stats of my monsters. And there are a number of things that you can use to do that. The first thing that stands out are the rings that you can collect. There are 4 of them that are guaranteed, and there's a possibility of finding additional copies as well as the other 2 elsewhere. the War Ring, the Mage Ring, the Cleric Ring, the Sailor Ring, which I don't think I've gotten in this playthrough, and then there's also the Thief Ring and the Attack Ring. I forget. The Fight Ring? I think that's what it's called. There's one for attack and one for speed, but those aren't available in any story mode locations. The Sailor Ring, which does defense, I can pick up actually from the Mermaid Queen by going back to Pelona after clearing the events of the pirate world. And that is probably something that I'm going to do now, because the Sailor Ring boosts defense, the War Ring boosts HP, and the Mage Ring boosts MP growth. Basically, it adds an additional 3 to the stats gained at every level. And each of those 3 points adds 6 points to the beta value calculation, which means approximately once every 42 levels, actually, yeah, once every 42 levels, I think, your monster will have 1 beta value higher more than it would have without the ring. So essentially, if a monster is wearing a ring from level 1 and goes to level 43, it will have a beta value 1 higher than it otherwise would have from the extra stat points provided by the ring. There's also the nuts. You can find nuts on the ground. Nuts like Attack Seed and Mystic Nut. Those just add to a monster's stat. You can farm them. You can just walk around in Magic Key Worlds with repellents on and just swap around between them a whole bunch and just keep spawning those nuts and keep adding them. There's another way to add to the stats of your monsters without increasing their level. Because that's the other thing, right? Is that you also lose a little bit of progress with every level that you gain. But you can also do this. You can encounter bards by having a monster with its last 3 numbers of its experience points held be the same, which by sheer coincidence happened after that battle. This was not planned. I did not know how much experience I was going to get from that warrior encounter earlier, but as it happens, we've got a bard, we might as well. Special medicine if he manages to defeat me. And we're going to see what that medicine does in short order. Now, as you can see, these are Devapine, Archdemon, and Snapper. We're still on Alpha Level 14 table. This is the same table from earlier. We're just getting some slightly different monsters. But I'll still try and recruit. Might as well. I've got the meat. I've still got the money. I've still got like 10,000 gold stored away in the vault. So, ooh, no. The demons, or the devil monsters, are generally pretty immune to defeat, but plant monsters are also generally pretty vulnerable. Something that I can do if I need to is I can look up the resistances of the different monsters in the middle of the battle just to see what I get. Okay, Archdemon recruit. Oh, there goes Twin Heads. Oh well. Okay, level up. And one for you too. That's fine. Hey, Archdemon. Okay. So this Archdemon should be approximately level 71 plus or minus 2. Yes, there we go. Level 72. That is about what I expected. And actually, here, I'll just bust out my calculator. I can tell you what this monster's beta value is right now, just by inputting a few stats. Loading, please wait. Some low MP. 10. Its beta value is 10. It's lower than all of the monsters that I currently have right now. But it might still be useful, because as I mentioned earlier, the table is determined by your alpha value, which is the average of each individual monster's beta value. So it is going to be useful to have monsters with very, very low beta values, because I can have them team up with monsters with very high alpha value or beta values in order to average that out into a middling alpha value. Or potentially send one very strong monster in with 2 very weak ones and still get a comparatively low alpha value in the end. The low alpha value tables, generally speaking, are not as useful. Everything that's like 4 or below is not terribly impressive. I'm looking at the list right now, and it's like, there's nothing super notable on that list. There's no, like, super cracked, saves a ton of time, recruitable monsters. Once you start getting to 5, I think is when things start getting interesting and useful. But I'm going to have to play with the different stats of my monsters in order to, at all times, be aware of what I'm going to get. And also, here's something else. You can't decrease a monster's stats. You can only increase them. I guess the one thing that you can do to decrease a stat is if it's holding stat boosted equipment, you can't remove it or replace it with something that doesn't do anything, like the Brave Cape or a defense scale, which is just 5 defense. And that is an item that was specifically added into this game so that you would be able to change the held item of a monster without having to create another menu for it, which they didn't want to do because there were too many menus in this game to begin with. Anyway. Oh, Evil Slash. That's not bad. We're going to send that Arc Demon back. And now you're going to see what the Bard does. Check this shit out. MP rose by 20. Agility rose by 20. MP rose by 20. Now, I'll just tell you, those were the lowest of the 6 main stats. Wildness we just ignore. Wildness just does not matter. Those were the lowest stats, and they got raised by 20. That's what the special medicine does. So, before that, King Crimson's maximum MP was 235. Now it's 255. That is an effective increase in its impressiveness score of about 40 points, which is about... Well, it's 4 over 25 of a level. So that's 16%? That's 16% of a beta value level. So I got 16% of an increase for this monster. Agility is worth a little bit less. 20 times 1.5 is 30. 30 over 25 is, okay. Yeah. So that's like more like 1/8, more like 12%. 12% of a level. And then for MP, that's another 16% of a level. But you can see how, like, let's say I farm 7 or 8 Bard encounters. I've managed to increase the impressiveness score, or whatever you want to call it, of my monsters in a very substantial way, with just a little bit of time and effort invested, because I'm pretty sure if you have a full inventory, which you can have, and control the HP values and EXP values and a few other things or whatever, Bards, I'm pretty sure, can't be the only NPCs that you qualify to encounter. Kind of like with Warriors. It's possible to meet the condition for Warriors and no other NPCs. I believe it is possible to meet the condition for Bards and no other NPCs. So we can very deliberately target specific NPCs, and then it's just a matter of popping a repellent, refilling our inventory if we need to, and then walking around until we find one. So, this changes a lot. Because, in one sense, the monsters that I recruit in the course of clearing the story mode and getting to, like, the farming phase of the run don't matter anymore. Because I could just do a whole bunch of Bard encounters and raise their stats. And if I did that enough times, they would reach 999 in every stat. Even if they can't gain experience anymore, even if they're already level 99 or at their max level, I can keep increasing their stats by finding nuts and fighting Bards. That's important. It's also important to remember that because that's a one-way function, I might lose access or have more difficult access to some of the lower encounter tables with the monsters that I actually like to use once their beta values are insanely high and they can't be averaged down to anything reasonable, even with like a beta value 0 slime that I get fresh from the Pirate World, right? Or whatever it would end up being. Because they only go as low as 0. The formula is floored at 0. Which is, I hope, not terribly surprising. So there's going to need to be, like, different stages of thieving depending on what the stats of my monsters are at the time that I'm doing the thieving, and I'm going to need to plan in advance to make sure that I get the things that are on the lower impressiveness score tables before it's too difficult to go back for them. which means it's going to change the way that I do the breeding. The breeding is also going to be entirely different because now I'm not as reliant on getting bosses and recycling them as before. Previously, I was routing the breeding for all the monsters under the assumption that I was only going to be remaking the required ingredients for the terminal bosses. I completely ignored all theft and did not even consider it as an option. And the way that the math works out, you have like just enough room, I guess, to make some bosses, make some terminal bosses that are not used in any other recipes or anything, use those as ingredients to make the rest of the terminal bosses, and then terminate with Lamp Genie and Yggdrasil and other monsters that require a boss to make, but are themselves not useful for making other bosses. You can order things in such a way that there aren't any conflicts. But the tolerance is low. You do have to be very deliberate about it, or else you're going to have to end up making some extra Draco Lords, which takes, I don't know, 15 minutes or so each time you need to do that. It's making extra boss monsters just to be used as a generic boss ingredient in a recipe for something like Rosevine or Greycoast or Darkhorn is not a good use of your time and should be avoided at all possible. And I did plan it out so that they could be avoided, and it's definitely not mandatory. But now that I can steal Rosevines and Darkhorns, it's even less necessary than it was before. In fact, with full access to the encounter tables from stealing monsters, I've determined that now at this point, I only need 2 rather than 6 boss recycling moments. 1 to make a Greycoast and 1 to make a Lamp Genie. Greycoast and Lamp Genie technically are recruitable in an extremely high rarity story world, or high rarity magic key world, but I'm not expecting to get a key of that value necessarily in the course of a run. Banking on it would be kind of strange. So, presumably, it's going to have to be bred. They're not stealable, they're not on any of the encounter tables, and their only valid recipe includes a boss monster as an ingredient. Greycoast, it's any water monster and any boss, with some exceptions, and then for Lamp Genie, it's Centasaur specifically with a boss makes a Lamp Genie. So there you go. Still going to need to use the bosses that I make for stuff. Terminal bosses like Dark Dream and Genocido. Like, yeah. They're still going to have their place in their use, but I'm not as constrained as I was before. Which means now I have the option of doing breeding that has bosses as one of the options for an ingredient. Even if it's not the best. Like, I could use bosses to make King Slimes. There's plenty of ways to make King Slimes. Using a boss's ingredient is very fast, this one step, as opposed to, like, the lengthier ways of doing it. So maybe that will be optimal. I don't know. It's pretty tough to say. Everything is tough to say. The scale and complexity of this run have spiraled out of control, spiraled beyond my ability to appreciate, really spiraled beyond my ability to even articulate. All of this stuff is extremely complicated and interrelated. Speaking of which, the thing that determines the magic keys that you get, as far as I understand, is the level of the first monster in your party. Now, that's significant because unless you do some breeding, the max level of your monsters is hard capped at 80, and even then that's for only a specific subset of monsters have a level cap of 80. For almost every monster, it's lower than that, and in most cases, it's a lot lower than that. But the theft encounter table is very interesting, because at the highest level, you're encountering level 80 monsters. If you're on the encounter table for alpha levels 18 and 19, every single monster that you recruit and steal from another Monster Master should be level 80 or higher. So, in order, and also you want a higher level leader of your party when you pick up a magic key, because that generally results in keys with higher rarity monsters, and higher rarity monsters are generally speaking more useful. So what you could do, and what I might do in an actual run of this category, is get some monsters. It doesn't fucking matter what they are. Nothing matters anymore. Nothing matters, but it just does not matter as long as they can win fights against bards. I fight bards over and over and over again. I get to the alpha level 18 table, I recruit a robust or 2, or a white king, or a lizard man, or a mad cat, or something. But it already comes at level 80. It doesn't matter what the levels of the monsters were that recruited it. All that matters is their stats, and in fact I want their level to be low. But I can use high stat, low level monsters to gain high level monsters to get good keys so that I can get fast ingredients so that I can speed up the process overall. Right? And I don't know how I'm going to do that. I have other games that I like to play in a sort of speed or challenge capacity, the main one being Mario Superstar Baseball for the Nintendo GameCube. And Mario Superstar Baseball for the Nintendo GameCube, as a baseball simulation game, is much more closed-ended. You decide your roster, you decide who you're going to fight, you assign them fielding positions and lineup order positions, and then you decide what you are going to do while you are at the plate or on the mound from a relatively small, in context, number of options. And with many of the choices being extremely obvious at this point, given all the level of work that has been put into this game. So you are making a lot of decisions. But it's like a lot of mostly easy decisions. And there's not a whole lot of variation. The constraints that are imposed by the various different star missions of the characters really give you a lot to work with in terms of shaping the overall trajectory of the run. From each of the different categories, for each of the different characters, for each of the different teams, and then also for all superstars or whatever. The puzzle has enough... the Sudoku has enough given digits to make solving it not terribly difficult of a prospect. With this game, I need to jump through 310 hoops. 309 because you're given Slash for free. Slash the slime. And I have no idea what order I'm going to jump through those hoops in. Or those hoops because I have no idea what to expect on any particular run. I don't know what magic keys I'm going to get. I don't know which of the 10 monsters I'm going to get when I encounter any particular foreign monster master. Even if I do know which 10 it's selecting from, I don't know which ones I'm going to get. I could potentially retry over and over if I'm counting on getting something specific, and I need to get lucky recruiting it. And then what? And then what do? I use the high stat, high level monsters to get good keys, and then I start breeding things in a certain order, but it's impossible to plan for. This route looks a lot different if you have easy access to, say, trumpeters. Stand out as something where if it was like, if I could just pop into a magic key world and snap those up, that would speed up a lot of stuff. And same with other very high value targets, like Metal Kings, Gold Slimes, Gold Golems. Some of these things are thievable, right? But then others are just kind of breeding intensive or whatever. And all of that got me thinking. I'm not sure it makes sense to approach Max Catalog as an RTA speedrun. Because it's going to be an immensely frustrating process, even going in with the best of plans. You're not going to be able to reasonably react and route on the fly to what the game gives you. Not to mention the Big Roost bottleneck, which is a huge pain in the ass. Considering that you could just go key after key after key after key with no Big Roosts. And then what do? So, probably what the RTA speedrun would end up doing is playing up until you get your first key, seeing if you can find Big Roost in that key, and then starting over completely if it's not there. That is not fun to do in an RTA setting. It's not reasonable. And here's another thing. I don't know how much fucking time this is going to take. I have not been able to get a coherent time estimate of how long it's going to take to complete a run of this challenge in an RTA setting or in any setting. And I'm assuming that there are going to be sleep breaks if necessary. If this is a 30-hour prospect, I don't know. If it's a 30-hour prospect, there's going to be sleep breaks or whatever. So accounting for that, just 30 hours of gameplay with breaks at the appropriate time. Maybe that's what it is. Or maybe it's more like 10, or maybe it's more like 50. I don't know. All of this stuff is No one's ever done this before. No one's ever done this before or tried to even do it in an organized manner, as far as I know. I know that there are people who have maxed out their catalogs. I was one of those people. I eventually did max out my catalog when I was a kid, or I got damn near close to it, just from sheer persistence and having a lot of free time and being able to play my Game Boy Color in the car, driving to and from school, stuff like that. But I just brought up a screen, and this is a very important screen. This is the info screen. You can access it from the overworld at any time after you've done some of the intro cutscenes. Once Slash is on your team, you can access this screen from literally anywhere. This screen has two features that I would like for you to observe. First, the bottom box, categories. The goal of this series, the goal of the Speedwalk series, the goal of the Max Catalog Speedrun, is to make that number next to categories be 310 without the use of glitches or a link cable. This is possible to do. I've proved it in theory, and I've done it in practice, because I never used the link cable when I was a kid, and I was able to get every monster. It's just a matter of finding the chicken if you're playing as Cobi. Tara doesn't have to worry about it. Long story. But still, this is great. I didn't realize that I actually could check my progress on the run from anywhere. And when I was thinking about how to end the run, I think the end of the run is when you can display this screen, and categories has 310 after it. And if this was an RTA speedrun, the goal would be to make that happen as quickly as possible after hitting New Game on the File Select menu, or confirming the character of your name, as is Dragon Quest tradition, You name your Cobi, and then when you hit yes to confirm that it's your name, time starts. When you display this screen and it has 310, time ends, and you subtract sleep breaks. That's how it would work. I don't think that makes sense to do. Because the other thing is, I tried. I think the footage has been lost at this point, but I did do a stream where I tried to do Max Catalog, and I did 12 and a half hours, and then I had to go to bed. And I could not continue anymore because I was not even remotely close and I had no idea what I was doing. In large part because I hadn't looked into all of this stuff to the extent that I should have. All the stuff about stealing monsters and alpha levels and the ways to manipulate, the ways that NPCs spawn in the Magic Key worlds, and the way that eventually, through a number of means, affects Magic Key generation, the way that it opens up potentially new options or whatever. All of that stuff. It didn't work. I couldn't do it. And maybe I will be able to do it at some point, but that's too far away. There's just too many question marks between me where I am right now and being able to do that. So I need to be able to do something else as an intermediary step. And I do mean something else apart from that, and also apart from this, because the Speedwalk series is fun and I enjoy working on it. Or at least I have enjoyed working on it in the past. Sorry that this episode is 2.5 years after the previous one. There you go. And I hope that it's getting at least a few dozen people, hyped up for the eventual final product, and maybe that will increase farther in the future too, who's to say, but I want to be able to have something to show for it. I think I want to start really accelerating progress on making a file that has all 310 monsters. And with this, I'm only doing it an hour at a time, and I'm kind of making it up as I go along, and it's not really all of that organized. And the finished product is only an entertainment product. It's not really a speedrun. I've been doing things off camera, like grinding, So it's this isn't anything that could be entered onto an official leaderboard. It isn't comparable to anything. It's just its own thing. It's still worth doing, but not in that kind of challenge gamers spirit, the speedrunner's spirit, where it's I want to be able to create a video that shows me starting and doing and finishing the challenges all in one take, with as little editing as possible. Maybe there's editing for the sleep breaks, but that's it. If at all possible. Something like that. The same stuff that I've been doing in the other games, the same stuff that I've been doing Mario Party 3 and Mario Superstar Baseball. I think the format that I'm leaning into doing next is actually a more classical form of speedrunning. And for those of you who are around my age and grew up with Speed Demo's archive, this should be relatively familiar to you. It is the segmented speedrun, which is not as popular of a format these days. Basically, you record a segment. If you like what happened, you save your game, and then take that segment and put it in the final product. If you don't like what happened, you turn your game off and start recording the segment over again. So, in a very limited sense, it's kind of like a tool-assisted speedrun in the sense that you're only saving the progress that you like and undoing the stuff that you don't like. But it is a little bit limited because you don't have access to save states, so you can't restore a save file after it's been saved over. So, I think that makes more sense, because I'm going to need to react to what I get, and I'm probably going to want at least a little bit of time to plan without the timer going. And so, that's an advantage of this format, is you can take your time between the segments. Something that's important, though, is the timing. What's going to work for the timing of that? Because you're turning the game on and off a whole bunch of times, you're loading into the main menu or whatever. How are you supposed to compare the runs? And the answer is right before you, in the first box, right next to time. You might have noticed, that's been ticking up. That's because it's an in-game timer. That's literally an in-game timer. It does not advance while you are on the title screen, but after you hit continue and load into your file, it's ticking. It's still ticking. So, a segmented speedrun, there you go, just ticked. A segmented speedrun that is optimized for in-game time. This is an interesting challenge. It's a very different challenge. RTA challenges and segmented in-game time challenges are very different. Like the nature of the beast is quite different. But I kind of like it because this is so open-ended. Especially given the whole problem with the fact that magic keys are saved as they are revealed to you. You're gonna have to kind of react to what you get and just fucking deal with it. And that can lead to a lot of frustration. For one thing, if you miss out on Big Roost if you're playing on Cobi, but also just in general, if you're getting a whole bunch of keys that it's just beasts and plants over and over and over again. You're not getting any devils, you're not getting any high rarity stuff. It sucks, it's a whole bunch of wasted time. And you don't get to recoup that in any way. You kind of just have to start over if it's an RTA speedrun, and you kind of just have to do it in one shot from the beginning. Taking breaks only to sleep, essentially, if at all possible. With a segmented speedrun, I would mostly, and I do mean mostly, be able to choose which outcome of a random event that I want, and then grind for that until I get it. And if the thing that I want is just too difficult to grind for, I can change my mind and grind for something else, and then save the game after I get that instead. That, to me, sounds a little bit more interesting, because it will allow me to be thoughtful without being too stressed out, and too bummed out when I inevitably do not get what I want. But there's one more thing, which is to maintain the integrity of the final product, I would be instituting a rule, which I think is a very logical rule, which is only progress that is live streamed can be used. And that is to make sure that there is evidence on hand to investigate in the event that someone believes that the run has been tampered. Game Boy Color games like this are very easy to hex edit. I don't happen to know how to do the hex editing, but I could just, change a whole bunch of stuff. Assume that I was evil. I realize this is an incredibly strange assumption, but assume that I'm evil, and that I'm going to pick up a magic key, and then save my game, and then offline, I hex edit the magic key into the perfect key that I want, and then, wow, I reveal it later, and it's the perfect key. That's something that I could do, and, what's to stop me from doing that? And the answer is not necessarily anything. But if all of the progress has to be live streamed, at least there's going to be material to look at. And not all of it is necessarily going to be in the final product, but at least everything that is going to be in the final product will have an archive, right? And then the last thing that I've sort of been thinking about is tool assistance. Like I was saying, you can use save states to restore old save files, or you can just do manipulating stuff in your computer's library if you know how your emulator works. Which is, of course, not relevant for me because I have an entirely weird Game Boy Color with a cartridge of Dragon Warrior Monsters 2, and it's right here in my lap, and I would show you, but it's really comfortable in my lap, and I don't want to move it. But if someone were, say, to have an emulator and a copy of this game on a ROM, they could potentially create a whole bunch of save files and then bring them back whenever they want, especially if they get a magic key that they don't want. The magic keys are kind of the big bottleneck, right? Because you save your game as part of learning if it's a key that you want. So if you can undo that, you're doing something that people on a console with a cartridge cannot do. So I would not be doing that. I would not be using save states, and I would not be bringing back old save files. I would be running with whatever I get. And so probably that's going to be that same strategy that I was mentioning earlier, where I just speedrun the game over and over until I get my first key, and then I check to see if there's Big Roost in that key, and then if Big Roost is in that key, I start over. But at least at that point, I'm live streaming this, right? I'm live streaming until I get a Big Roost key after the first 20, 30 minutes of the game or whatever. Once I do get the Big Roost key, I can be like, okay, cool. So my game has saved as part of learning that I had a Big Roost key. Now I can do reconnaissance, I can do research, I can find out where the Big Roost is, I can start planning it out, and I can decide what I want to do next. And as long as I don't save my game, right, which I will be careful not to do, I can just approach things the way that I want and kind of take the best move that I can from my current position at most times. Understanding that I am going to need to save my game if I want to access additional magic key worlds. That is unfortunately an inevitability. But it does at least open the possibility of doing a number of really interesting, at least I think that they're interesting, maybe they're lame, but I think they're interesting kind of strategies, such as creating segments in which the only thing that I do is farm bard encounters or farm warrior encounters specifically for magic keys. And if I get a warp wing, segment undone. But if I get a magic key, segment saved. And that would be a way to fill up my inventory with magic keys or high stat monsters very, very quickly, at least in terms of in-game time, right? Because the in-game time is only getting saved when the file is getting saved. So I would still be optimizing for something very concrete, because this timer is only incrementing while the game is on, and it's only saved when the game is saved. But I would be able to do it in a real-world context that is a lot friendlier and a lot easier for me in particular to work with, because I do not have the kind of schedule that can accommodate doing 20-plus hour attempts of stuff with any kind of reliability or low impact on the other responsibilities and things that I have in life. It's just not gonna work. So yeah, this challenge sure is a heck of a whole lot. And I know a whole lot about this game about collecting monsters that was primarily designed to be enjoyed by children. But I still think it's an interesting challenge, and I still think it's worthwhile, but I am also thinking that I'm probably going to want to go about it differently than I did before. And I think that that's overall a positive development. I'm going to be interested to see where things go from here. It's possible that I'm going to be doing something like keeping only the segments that I want for this Speedwalk series going forward. That might be the way that I want to do it, just to keep things moving along. Or it could be that I'm just going to take a relaxed pace and go at it at whatever speed makes sense and just kind of, you know, roll with the punches or whatever. Maybe farm for a Big Roost key off-screen once I've established how I do that and you've gotten a chance to see, you know, how that process works, just so that you know what's happening. But then I skip all the bullshit so we can actually get to the interesting part and actually get the fucking chicken. That kind of thing. Because, yeah, I would like to finish this series. I have not given up. Clearly, I have not given up on the series. It's taken me a little while to get back to it, but I promised that I would come back, and I'm back. I don't know if I'm here to stay, but I'm back, you know, again. And it would be good to, you know, finish something that I started. This is something that I have a problem with personally, is finishing projects that I start. So I'm just trying to figure out a way to make it happen while still maintaining the same spirit that I had at the beginning. Being like, I'm gonna make a video series in which I get every monster. I know the slow way to do that. I know the slow way to get every monster. But I'm very interested in figuring out the fast way also. And that's still kind of a question that sends me into an unbearable kind of confusion that I can only bring myself out of by kind of looking at my notes and thinking, I need to get a paper route that I can actually roll with. I need to do more figuring things out. And there's still a lot more work that I need to do behind the scenes. I've been looking at the growth tables for stat growth so that I can figure out what the expected contribution of the impressiveness of a monster is going to be, assuming that I raised it from level 1. Because I need to figure out what monsters are going to be in my party again. I don't think it's going to be Night Rich and Gold Golem and King Leo. Gold Golem might be in the final set. I don't think that the other two will be. Their stat growths are just not good enough. Or at least I can imagine going for better, especially if I have access to some pretty nutso ingredients with a fairly low amount of time invested, frankly. It does not take terribly much in order to get to alpha level 9. And something that I neglected to mention earlier is that the monsters that I steal themselves have beta values that are useful. The Archdemon that I got earlier in this episode is beta value 10 or whatever. The Metal King, I off-screen, I controlled my alpha value to level 9 and got a Metal King. And that Metal King had a beta value of 14. So if I got 3 of those, now I have access to the level 14 table. And maybe there's something on the level 14 table that will be an even higher alpha value than that. You can kind of like jump and chain it. So the monsters that you're stealing and potentially increasing the value of via bards are going to get access to higher level and more interesting monsters. So you could chart all kinds of paths. And I think exploring those paths can be cool, but I think exploring those paths is only going to be cool and interesting if I'm capable of doing it in a saved, segmented process, where I'm only committing to any instance of progress as part of saving my game. Okay, we've now really reached the point at which this is all kind of falling apart at the seams, and if you've managed to stick it out through the video up until this point, I very much appreciate your patience. And I will continue to appreciate your patience as I figure out what the hell I'm actually going to do for episode 10 of this series. But if nothing else, I hope that listening to me ramble for this long has given you an appreciation for the immense inner struggle that I'm going on as I continue to contemplate this, again, game designed mostly for the enjoyment of children, and how to complete an arbitrary task within that game in an efficient amount of time as measured by either a clock in the game itself or in our real world. Patent pending, TBD, watch this space. And I should have done all of this earlier. That's the thing. Even before I did my first failed 12.5-hour attempt, I should have looked at the encounter table for foreign monster masters so I could see what kind of monsters that I have. I'm still kind of kicking myself that I didn't do that because I could have potentially gone down a very different path. But here we are. We're in episode alpha, the non-canon episode, navel gazing and wondering what the hell we're going to do. And the most that I can say at this point is I'm going to try and use these foreign monster master encounter tables to speed things up as efficiently as I can. But it's also going to require a lot of testing. And I anticipate that probably some of that testing will be streamed, if there is interest. If you are going to be interested in potentially watching me stream the routing for this game on Twitch, please do let me know. Because ultimately I do want to create a final product that is enjoyable for people to watch. Even people who aren't necessarily super familiar with this game, but can at least appreciate the love of a good puzzle that springs forth from my inner being unabated, even in the face of incredible complexity and low odds. So, yeah. That's what I've got to offer. segmented speedrun with in-game time, and all progress live streamed is probably the new form of the challenge. We'll see. And in the meantime, I've got more research to do. But episode 10 soon? Episode 10 within the next 2.5 years? Episode 10, maybe?